Nick, your story begins with early success, Air Force, corporate career, early retirement, but then you find yourself drifting without purpose. What happens to a man's identity when achievement stops working as a source of fulfillment?
Oh, well, excellent. And thank you for having me on the show, by the way. So what happens is it's like you're floating in space, like you're fading away because your identity was wrapped up in the work, the achievements, that phase one, I would call it, of our lives. We're often taught you are, what you do and how well you do it. And then once you leave that or separate from that, so like I voluntarily retired, but if you had a major life change that changed that, then all of a sudden, you go, well, what am I doing now? What's next? Who am I without this? Because I knew exactly where I fit into the whole scheme of things before, but then after that achievement phase was done, then I didn't know how to orient myself to the new phase, which is more about relationships, because we're not taught that.
Hmm. See, I think that that is something that a lot of many, if not every single one of us, experience or feels like that. I don't know if with the is because of societal expectations, or I don't know if just because how we were raised or culturally, that we feel that people might like us or want to be with us based on what we do or what we have rather than who we are. So it's almost like, which in women is different. Women feel like, okay, if somebody wants to be with me because I don't know, like I'm a nice person, I'm beautiful, I'm a good, uh, and I'm good with nurturing all of that. But women, we feel that, well, this is who I am. Whether I'm successful, my status, my my title, the house, the car, the watch, and I do feel that at some point we hit a wall in terms of we keep achieving, we keep getting the promotion or the money or the status, and yet we're like, okay, but something is missing, something, and we feel that the more we get, that we will finally just feel whole. We will finally feel that sense of peace. What have you discovered through your own journey about that particular principle of us believing or thinking that the more we achieve or the more we identify with what we do rather with who we are ends up being in not only unfulfilling but also quite miserable, could be even.
Yes, it actually can be miserable. And so I look at it like, society shines a spotlight and we glorify the, that achiever. So it's kind of like, so there's a couple of ways I can break this down. So one way is being like a warrior out on the plains, and then the village elder, the wise man in the tent, and so the glory is out there on the plains, and you're like, yes, I'm this warrior out doing the thing. And but there needs to be, later on, there's that shift where, like, we need you in the tent, we need your wisdom in the tent. And sure, you can still achieve and be out there on the plains, but we need you here right now. Kind of like with a sports team, there's the star sports player, but then there's the back office of the sports team. And so sometimes, yes, everybody, the spotlight for society is, yes, everyone wants to glorify and talk about that star player, but just important are the people in the back office that are, making the decisions and pulling the strings. And so that also, it no one's ever taught like that it's okay to make that transition from the achievement to the relationship. So the relationship based phase two would be the, how, what I mean to my family, my community, my legacy, building my legacy, and being like a more of a mentor role but there's nothing really shining a light on that and glorifying that. So we don't see a lot of that in society. So as we come up, especially as men, we're just taught, get out there and just achieve, show, do your peacock thing, show your bright feathers, show all but a lot of times it can feel empty. And so, but if you can make that switch over to the relationship where your meaning is through the relationships that you have, then it's much more fulfilling. But I'm not saying that it's not nice to have all the material stuff as well. Yeah, so that is also a good part of it.
Do you believe that? Let me see. How can I put it? This. Do you believe that we can make that transition or know this without going through the pain? Because it seems like everyone in their later age, whether in their 60s or 70s or 80s, will tell us that, hey, don't work too much, don't attach yourself with what you do. It's all about the experiences and the relationship and the connections and all of that. And then yeah, sure, I'm different. I'm different. I That was you, but I'm different. And it's almost hard, almost impossible for us to take that lesson without us experiencing the pain. So sometimes I wonder if we can bypass the pain or even do it before the pain happened, before we find ourselves in a situation where, you know what? Yes, sure, having this nice thing, I mean, having all the material stuff is nice because I have more peace in terms of resources. Whether you reach financial freedom or to a level where you can be more relaxed around resources, money, and all of that. But then at the same time, it's like, hey, I don't have to push it through. I understand that that's a narrative in society that we all have to achieve. But if it doesn't make any sense to me, let me just do something else. Even most people might not like it because it will trigger some insecurity about them not being enough. So they have to project how I should do more. But I'm gonna go my other route and do what I think is best for me without having to go through the pain of, hey, I'm miserable. I keep pushing. I keep doing all of these things, and yet I feel that I'm falling deeper into a dark hole. Do you think that people can actually do that, or we have to go through the pain before we see the light?
Yeah, I thought a lot about this, and I know that, like you were saying earlier, I felt, because I heard some of the warnings before it happened to me, and just like you had said, I said, well, I'm different. And so I think it's one of these ego things where I felt, well, yes, that's weaker people, not me. I will figure this out on the fly. I can adjust rapidly, but and I so I know that for me, I had to go through it, and I'm glad that I did because it gave me more perspective. But I'm sure that it is possible. I don't know a lot of examples of people that got ahead of it, but I'm sure it's possible. But you has to be somebody that can put their ego aside and actually listen to some people that have gone through it and say, let me actually take some steps right now because I don't want this to happen to me. But I think it's one of those things where most of the time everyone's going to say I'm different. I feel like I know what I'm doing, but it's one of those things where you think that you know what the situation's going to be until you're in it, and you try to prepare. So I think of what comes to mind is like a basic training in the military. They train you for war, but then when you're actually in the battle, it's not the same as the training. I'm sure, yes, you'd fall back on the basics of the training, but it's a different thing because it's real now, versus simulated. So yeah, I think that most of the time, a lot of people have to actually go through that pain. And I'm sure that somebody, one of your listeners, says, I avoided it. I was fine. But they are a rare exception. Most people just think they're the exception.
Yeah, yeah. I think that we all believe that we are the exception, and if we are all the exception, that means that we are the rule. So that's
Right.
that's the funny thing about it. It's interesting because I wonder what you went through in terms of when you made that transition. Because one thing that my work focuses a lot on identity, right? And as we were saying earlier, when we identify with what we do, with okay, this is who Daniel is in the world, this is who Nick is in the world, right? Whether you're a entrepreneur or lawyer, a doctor, something that gives you a lot of pride, as we said, the ego gets in place. But it feels to me that what many will call the dream, that financial stability or even a financial freedom, the accomplishment, tends to lead to a crisis. As we said, it's almost like, okay, we don't feel fulfilled. And I feel that success can sometimes become the very thing that traps us. Because here is okay, this is what I have, this is almost like secure, this is just me. Leaving that behind and trying something else that might feel more fulfilling means leaving what makes me me behind. And it is so hard because the ego tries to keep you where you are and tries to keep that identity in place. And many people don't understand how moving from one stage to another can be extremely painful emotionally, because you're just, once again, you're leaving one part of you behind and accepting, hey, this got me this far, but it doesn't serve me anymore. Do I want to be happy or do I want to be right? When you went through that transition, maybe in your case was slightly different because you were retired already. You were not keep working long hours and trying to accomplish more. But how was that transition in terms of, hey, Nick is no longer that guy who was in the Air Force, that guy who was very successful in corporate America, that guy who's not, who got to retire before the age of 50, but now is a different person. How were you able to transition that from an identity level?
Right. So I look at it like kind of like a Olympic athlete. They train and train, and their whole self is wrapped up in their their event, their sport. And then once they go to the Olympics and they say they win, and then their trainer says, "Okay, well that's your last Olympics. You're too old now, so you can't do the Olympics anymore." And then you say, "Well, this is all I know. I've spent my whole life doing this, and now you're no longer this Olympic athlete." Well, you're still, you can say I'm an Olympic athlete, but you're pretty much retired from that, but your whole life has been geared to being the best at this one thing. And so that's what also happened with me. And so I felt like I had a lot of currency that was no longer accepted anymore. So I felt like, I felt like kind of a big deal. My ego, once again, I felt like, oh, I'm important. I'm a big deal. And then once I retired, then I was just some guy, just a regular guy, just walking around the store, seeing what's on sale today. And I felt like, I was fading away. Like I was, no one noticed me anymore. I was invisible. And even one of the tough things also was, like, even friends and family, because people would ask me, "Oh, did your friends and family, were they concerned about you?" And I said, "No, because nobody noticed. Everybody said, 'Oh, you won. Hey.'" So it's hard to ask for help or say something's wrong when everybody is cheering for you and praising you, like, "Oh, you did great. You're wonderful. I'm living through you. I want to do what you did." And secretly, I'm like, I feel like I'm invisible when I'm fading away and I no longer even exist. And so what happened was, one day I was just thinking, man, I I kind of hit that turning point, and I was thinking, well, I feel like I died, but I'm not dead, and but that part of me died, and so, and I heard somebody say, maybe in another life I can do this other thing, and I was thinking, well, wait, maybe my other life could start now, because I felt like I was given that first life, that first phase, and I navigated that. But then I said, well, now that's over. I can I can create a different life. I can hit, and I remember thinking, I wish I had a reset button that I could hit, and I was like, oh, okay, let's do that. Let's reset. So uh, I developed a system because I'm a systems guy to work with systems and processes. So I said, well, let me do this for myself and document what I did and see what works. And if you like, we can I can walk you through some of those steps.
For sure. I love that you share that story because we tend to be very cynical. When we see people who are extremely successful, who have the dream life, who retire or have the financial freedom, and they're quote unquote struggling, we think like, come on, then. I mean, I'm struggling. I mean, I'm trying to make enough money. So you don't have the right to complain. And I think
Right.
that is a, whether it is true or not, whether the other people around us feel that way or think that way, we feel it as if when we are at the level of success, we say, I don't feel safe to reaching out to anybody because I don't want to be judged because I should be happy, I should be okay with it, and yet I'm not. And
Right.
I think it's just having people a perception or a different perspective. Hey, we're all humans, we're all struggle. Even it doesn't matter how successful or how miserable you are, you're just still going to struggle with that. But going back to the reset button, what's the difference, I guess, and this I might be going on a tangent, I don't know yet. And what's the difference between taking a break and truly pressing the reset button? Because how does one know when they're ready for a deeper reinvention versus just another surface level change?
Right. Well, so I took a break when I retired. I took a break. I moved down to Mexico, and I said, "Oh, I'm just going to be on the beach, have margaritas. I'll go on a boat." And so it was like this vacation mode. And so I did take a break, but then that only lasts so long. In my mind, I thought when I was a kid, when summer would come and you're off from school, I was like, that's the best part of my life. So as an adult, I was like, it'll be endless summer. It'll be summer forever. And I can just do whatever I want. But after working my whole life in structure, then when I'm just out just sitting around, that kind of got old. And like I said, I was like, there's got to be more than this. I need something. I I need a new North Star. I need a new mission, And so I had that rest period, and it was nice, but then took about 9 months, about the same time it takes to make a baby. It took about 9 months, and then I said, I need to do something. And so that's when it kicked in to start the reinvention.
Okay, that's when you did it, or even people that you help or coach, because we're gonna now dive deeper into what the reset button is. Uh, but also, how do people know, or the people that you have coached, in your case, once again, was slightly different because you were already retired, so you were free to do quote unquote whatever you wanted to do in your life. But I'm assuming that people that you help, many times they're not at that level yet where, hey, I have free time. I don't have anything else to do. I can live like this for the rest of my life. I would assume that most of them, I'm wrong, but who knows? Most of them still have a career. Most have a job, and it is time for reinvention because it seems to me that a lot of them, or a lot of people in general, they choose a career or a path based on what they think society wants from them, or based on what they think their parents want from them. And then you hit a point where the sunk cost fallacy in, hits you in terms of, well, do I really want to reinvent myself when I've spent so much time, effort, and money building this career? And I'll rather just do this because then I'll feel like a failure. How does your system work, and how does it help people to really come to a peace with the fact that that is safe and actually encouraged to reinvent themselves?
Right. I would say a lot of my clients are not retired, and I thought that they would be when I started this, but it seems like a lot are actually, I'd say the majority are divorced men, men that have just recently divorced because instead of their identity necessarily being the job, it's their identity was their family unit, their wife, their kids, and then all of a sudden they went from living in this house with their family. Now they're in a studio apartment somewhere trying to say, what's next? What do I do with my life? It was going to be this, and now it's taken this dramatic shift over here. And so they are like, how do I restart? How do I restart again from this point? And so, yes, it's not. So there's a lot of, you said that, do we have to go through a crisis to do this? But I think sometimes, for you to reach out and say, hey, I need help with something with my life. A lot of times it does take the crisis. But the first step that I tell people is, so we do an audit. We do and so not like the scary IRS audit, but the a personal audit, because in order for us to make any changes and figure out how to move forward, we need to know where we're at. We need to know the baseline, what we're working with. So all of the our assets, liabilities, all of our personal traits, like we just see what good things do we have about ourselves that we want to carry forward and continue doing, and what no longer applies that we were doing that maybe isn't going to serve us in this new direction that we'd like to move forward. So we start off with an audit just to know, and then also in addition, at this very first stage, there's also a smaller version of the audit if somebody is really struggling and they're just trying to make it through the day. Naturally, I'm not a therapist or a mental health expert or anything. I'm just going through what has worked for me and some folks that I know. If you're really struggling, naturally try to call somebody. But also, I have a dignity scan, because if you have a little bit of, it can remind yourself of your dignity, then that's like a pilot light that we can build from there. So, and that would, so if somebody's super struggling and they really hit that wall, it's some prompts like, uh, what is a skill or strength that you have? And then you'd write that down on a sheet of paper. And then how do you know? How do you know that you have it? Then you write that down. And then what is one person, or who is one person that cares about you? So you don't have to name like everyone that you think cares about you, but there's some people that struggle thinking no one in the world cares. But just think of one person that you think cares about you, and then how do you know? How do you know that they care? One person that I care about. How do I know that I care about them? One value that I've kept. How do I know that I kept that value? So I have some prompts and that what that does is it just reminds you that you are in there. You're still in there, and then we can build from there. And then from there we go to that standard audit, self audit that I was talking about. And then what we'll do is, and this we want to honor and release the old version of ourselves, the old story. So what that looks like for me is, so I wrote a letter out to myself, and I thanked myself for all the achievements and everything, and I forgave myself for the mistakes and said, hey, you've been great. We've come a long way, but now I'm taking over. We gotta let go of you. And so, I sign it, and then we do a bowl burning ceremony. We burn that letter to release it. And then from that audit, we're going to take the good qualities that we like that we want to carry forward, and we're going to put those down. And then, almost like if we were writing a screenplay for a movie, uh, we're developing a character. We can develop a well, what would I like to be going forward? I automatically assumed all of these habits and traits, but if I could choose, what would I like to choose? So, maybe, there's people that consider themselves a morning person or a night person. Maybe I've always been a morning person, but maybe I want to be a night person. And there's nobody saying that I can't do that. I can say I think I'd like to be a night person. What type of, maybe my morning routine was a certain way. Now I think it'll be different. What would I like that to look like? What is this new version of me? Ideally, what would the new Nick eat? Uh, what's my exercise routine, if there's any exercise routine? What music do I listen to? I don't have to listen to the same music that I did before. And then once we get all that done, uh, we're we're setting out this new version of ourselves, and then I can discuss. I'll pause so you can ask any questions, but then I'll discuss how we can reinforce some of this new identity that we're trying to implement in. But I'll pause so you can ask any questions.
First of all, that is extremely fascinating. I love everything that you said. Also, the fact that most of your clients are divorced men says a lot, because the way that I got to reinvent my life was through a divorce,
Oh,
And yeah, I guess we either hit a crisis where we achieve, and we feel unfulfilled, or sometimes life throws us a curveball. Hey, the life that you were imagining, the life that you were supposed to have, it's not. I mean, it's not gonna happen anymore, and your
right.
life turns upside down. And to me, is probably arguably one of the worst experiences that somebody can go through.
Yes.
And I remember sitting. I wish I had a coach back then. I just had to figure it out all on my own. But I remember one day, because I used to be a financial analyst for a while, and I remember I was in the middle of a career transition. I was going from financial analyst to data or business analytics, only because there was more money there or better opportunities, rather than, oh, that's something that I want to do.
Right.
I remember sitting on my couch one day, probably 2 years ago, and I said, what do I really want? And I think that's the first time I asked myself that question, like, what do I really want? Because I mean, at the end of the day, my life turned upside down. I lost everything that I've known. At this point, it's like, do I really want to keep doing this, or it is time for me to just change? And that's how sort of the idea of the podcast came, more as an intuition, like follow this path, and tying up to the TEDx talk that you gave. To me, that was kind of weird, because I've always been in the past shy, socially anxious, introverted, somebody who used to stutter a lot for like 20 years. And to me, it's like, how am I supposed to do that when I feel this way? And I started just developing that, I started working on that. I didn't write a letter, I didn't have the prompts, but I guess I was doing the same exercise in my head, similar to what you do, things they did with yourself and do with your clients, in terms of, okay, I don't think I have the skills for this, but something's telling me I'm going to go for it. And like, one thing that I came to find out is that I had skill or a talent I didn't know I have, and that led me to eventually public speaking. And this year I'm like, okay, this is so weird, because now I feel on my element, even though it was never there. So a lot of it came to alignment, which we're going to touch in a minute. But yes, I feel that what happens to a lot of us is not asking ourselves the real questions, or the right questions. And I think with your prompts, and even though it might be hard at first, because it is uncomfortable, because we it will force us to think, like, what skills do I have? I remember my ex-wife, when we were still married, she asked me, well, you have all these skills, like, which ones? Because I cannot think of anything. I can, because to it, it becomes so natural, so normal when you have a natural skill that, well, that's not a skill. It's not something
Right.
that works so hard. And then you start discovering, oh, I'm doing this or I'm doing that. And if once we get real to ourselves, then that's when start getting the signs, or the information, like, you know what, maybe I should pursue this, maybe I should pursue that. But I wonder if you have encountered, either with yourself or with people that you coach, the subconscious stories or fears that tend to keep people from making a meaningful shift. Because I think, even when you were talking about, hey, you don't have to be a morning person if you want to be a night person, you don't have to listen to the same music, you can redesign your life from scratch. Because, no, I mean, it's your life at the end of the day. Nobody's going to say anything to you, and as you said way earlier, guess what, nobody cares. But we feel this attachment, like, but no, how do I mean, if that means me being a whole new person, even though that can guarantee, that can has have the promise of me having a more fulfilling life, I'd rather be in misery because it's familiar, and the fear is rooted at a nervous system. What are some stories that, subconscious stories or even fears that you have discovered on yourself and people that you have coached?
Well, yeah, you're right. There's a lot that, will try to keep you where you are. Like everything, your brain wants you to be safe and, familiar is it's constantly trying to bring you back to familiar things. And it's kind of like, I think of even relationships when people say, "Oh, I have my type," my type of person. They're not my type, and it's because you want to get that familiarity. And yeah, for me, there was a time where I finally started dating someone who wasn't my type, and it's been the healthiest relationship I've ever had because I said, "Wait a minute, my type is really bad for me," you know. And so, but it's in your brain, yes, it's constantly going to battle and try to keep you in that one, in where you're at, and not it's that comfort zone. And also, just I think that people normally, it takes a lot to make that change. Another thing that's popping into mind is like when they say, if a rocket is trying to go, into space, you have, most of the fuel is burned trying to get out of that atmosphere, and then once you're out of there, then you're fine. But it's a huge effort, and so that's why we had to try to, design some stuff in to reinforce. So for example, when I talked about doing that audit and then putting in the characteristics that you would like in for your new version of yourself, that's not over, because then you could just set that paper aside and then you continue going back to your regular, how you were before. So how we reinforce that is, so there's a few things. There's one of the things is what I talked about in the TEDx talk, which you can use the uniform method. Which, so for your listeners that are unfamiliar, it's like, so my best friend was a police officer, and when he put his police uniform on, whether he felt like it or not, he is a police officer now, and he has to conduct himself as the police officer. So instead of having a full uniform, you could have just a bracelet, a ring, a watch, a necklace, and then you can just touch and be like, yes, I have the uniform on. I am this person now. But still, there's still the old you that's going to start coming back. So to help reinforce this, what we would do is, we get together the new version of you, we're going to do some a default. These can be adjusted a little bit, but the default is, I have my clients take a dance class, a cooking class, and a language class. And what this does is, now you're going to go out, and instead of being the old you, you're going to introduce yourself as the new version of you. So instead of saying, "Hey, I used to be XYZ, nice to meet you," now you're coming in, presenting yourself as this new version of you, and you're going to talk about, what your interests are now. So that's going to be just, and it could be anything that you might be interested in. And I also, during that audit, so if we go back to that audit, there's, when we're in that achievement mode, a lot of things kind of fall to the wayside. We forget about them. So stuff that you were passionate about as a kid, but then you got too busy. So like for me, I used to write poetry, a lot of poems in high school. But then after high school, I didn't write poems anymore because either I was too busy or too cool. I don't know, but I didn't. And also, I wanted to be a chef when I was 10 years old, and then I got too busy to do that. So now I say, in that audit, look for those things and bring them back, try them out, because maybe there's still that magic in there, maybe not, but so now with this new version of us, we're going and we're meeting new people. And what these things are, so the dance class is very intimate. You're touching someone, you're dancing with them, and you're interacting. So it's not like you're showing up and you can just sit somewhere on the side. No, you're going to be actively involved. You're going to meet people and you're going to introduce this new version of you. So all these people, all they know is this new you. And then the cooking class, you're going to, burn a souffle or something with a new person, and you're working with somebody in that. And then the language class, you're going to horribly butcher some new language with other people as well. And so you're bonding with these people and you're putting that new you out there into the world. And that's all they know of you. And so now, so that helps reinforce that this new you. And so when they have, and if you say something, so you might say, well, I don't necessarily want to make friends with dance people, but that's not the point. It's like when you're dancing and you say something that you're curious about. So example, you could say, so instead of, someone had asked me earlier on, usually if you're used to introducing yourself as your title from work, now how do you introduce yourself? And you would introduce yourself as like, this is what I'm working on. This is what I'm interested in. And so I could say, I'm Nick, nice to meet you. My latest project is discovering more about bees and beehives and beekeeping. And also I'm looking into maybe getting my pilot's license. And so now that's what they know about you. And then, so that person themselves might not be into that, but they might say, oh, my brother, my cousin, I have a friend that is also getting their pilot's license. Or I know somebody who has a beehive up the street. Let me introduce you to so and so. And then you are meeting people that, and these interests, because people say, well, if I pick something, then am I locked in? No, you're just trying things out, because when you're finding your purpose, I say finding your purpose because it's easier to understand, but really it's revealed to you but you have to go out and you have to experience and expose yourself to more things. And this new version of you is out there being exposed to more things. And then you can say, I'm going to try this beekeeping thing for a little while. And you might be passionate about it for a month. And then you might say, okay, I'm done with that. What else? What else can I do? But, so these are some of the things, and there's more steps, but I will pause because I'm sure you have some questions for me, unless you don't.
That's brilliant. No, no, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. And you know what the interesting thing about, I guess, if I can definitely clearly see exactly why we have to do that in terms of doing new activities and showing up as a newer version of ourselves. Because if we show that way to the friends we already have, or the coworkers or the family, there's going to be a dissonance there. It's like, okay, who is Nick? What are you talking about? What I mean, that's not you. And that immediately puts you in fireflies. Now, now you feel inauthentic. Now you feel judged. Now you feel rejected by your own people around you. And the real and the reason is just because even you want to do a 180-degree change like this, for them it's like, okay, this is like, who are you?
Right.
But as you said, if you present yourself, they don't know the older version of you at all.
Right.
That's just who you are. And at the end of the day, when you can establish like a new identity, or even feel more yourself, is by building enough safety within your nervous system. Like, hey, being like this way, acting like this, speaking that this way, showing up as this improved version of me, or this more authentic version of me, is being accepted by others because they don't know the past. So
Right.
I don't feel like an imposter. I don't feel fake. And I think it helps a lot of people. Those I never experienced this because I'm originally from Venezuela. So we basically go to university or to college in the same city, and you have a lot of your friends. But what I've noticed here in America is that a lot of kids that go to a different state, to a different city, in a whole new environment, if they were kind of shy, introverted, or socially awkward in high school, they can be somebody completely different because nobody's there to call them out. Hey, dude, that's not who you are. In my case, after I got divorced and my group of friends was truly my wife's friends, that basically I ended up being alone because my friends were none of them live in Austin. I took improv classes. I started going to run clubs. I even joined Toastmaster, but I started showing up not as a different version of me, but a more authentic version of me,
Yes.
in a way that I used to play small. I used to kind of dim my light because I was like afraid of making people feel insecure or uncomfortable, or I don't know, like self-conscious. And I was like, okay, I want to connect with others, so I'm just going to play small. I'm going to almost play it invisible because I want to connect. But now I realize, well, that is taking me nowhere. So let me just be my full self. And if people like it, great. If not, well, that's my filter. So the whole point is, as you said, it's not even about taking the classes, but it's exposing yourself to new people with your new version until your nervous system feels like safe enough. Oh, this is just who we are.
Right.
We don't get that initial rejection that can kill the quote unquote dream of being this new version, which I assume by trying new things, it can lead you to finding, you said it, your purpose, but I think it's probably rediscovering clarity and alignment.
Yes. Yes.
Um, what practices or mindsets help somebody reveal a sense of purpose that is truly authentic?
Right. So we want to get that alignment in,
Yeah.
as you talked about, and then that reveals the purpose, it reveals the mission for right now. The more that you can be aligned, but a lot of times you just sitting at the house isn't going to bring that alignment. So that's why I say, if you can go and expose yourself to these new experiences, then it opens up all these different doors, and then you can say, oh, I'm interested in this. I'm interested in this, and it's kind of like as a back in childhood with the imagination, thinking, "Hey, today I'm going to be a fireman. I'm going to do this." As an adult, you can still do this. You can do it now, and then you find out, wow, I because there's something. Sometimes people have something in their mind that they're like, I've always wanted to do this, but then other times people say, I don't know. I have no idea what I want to do. And so if you can have a lot of experiences, then it it helps to reveal. And so like the next step would be the your environment, the curation of your environment, because after we get out into these classes and we start meeting new people as our new selves, then we're going to want to kind of change our environment around us to also align, once again, the alignment, align with this new version of us. And so that the easiest way to do that, which is the easiest way to change it, is if you moved somewhere. So like if I just moved I'm in Denver, moved to, anywhere else to, Branson, Missouri or something, then now I can completely change my environment to this new version. But a lot of times people don't like moving. So, but you could just take just small steps around your house, and you could just decorate it differently in the design, that this new version of you that would align with that. Just just small pieces here and there to remind you that this is the new version of you. But yes, it does come down to alignment, to help reveal what this new mission is going to be. So for me, a lot of times people say, "Well, what is your what is your mission? What are you doing these days? And so in that phase two, so I do a lot of mentoring, but then, but what really makes me, when I open my eyes in the morning and get out of bed, what makes me get out of bed is, for me, I found that I get a lot of, uh, so other people's success is my success. So I say, I'm going to make somebody's day today. Uh, there was, there was one day I was sitting around and I thought, do angels exist? And it wasn't really in a religious way, but I just thought, do angels exist? And if they do, how do I know I'm not one? And I said, maybe, hypothetically, maybe I can do miracles, but I can't do them for myself and I can't do them for anyone I know. I can only do it for strangers. And so I said, well, let's see. So I would go out and I said, because I would, my philosophy was, I don't know what kind of day I'm going to have. I can't control that, but I can absolutely make sure somebody else has a great day. And so, if you have your eyes open, so for me, there's all kinds of opportunities if you're looking for them to be the angel. So I would say, that's what I'm going to do. So when I wake up, I say, I'm going to make someone's day today. And I'm excited to, like, who's it going to be? What's the circumstances going to be? I don't know. But then when I go out, I'm looking and I will find something, and it doesn't have to be something crazy. It could be something really simple. So, like, just listening to somebody. So, just seeing somebody as a person. So, like at Subway or Chipotle, those restaurants, I used to, many years ago, I was a sandwich artist at Subway. And I remember people would just treat you like you're a machine and just be like, hey, give me this, give me this. And so now if I go, it could be busy lunchtime, but I'll stop. And when they say, what can I get started for you? I just say, how are you? How is your day? What's going? And I have an actual authentic moment with them, see them as a person, and it could be something as simple as that. And then also it could be more complicated because there was a time in my book I chartered a yacht and then I went to the mall and then I asked just strangers, hey, do you want to go on a yacht? And so I got a bunch of strangers on the yacht because, I wanted to be on the yacht. I said, other people, I had never been on a yacht before. And I said, I want that experience. Other people would probably like that experience too. So let's share that experience with some other folks. And so we had a great time. We had, quite a few people, strangers that we took out on a yacht for a day. And it was great. So it could be big, but that's for most people it can be also very small and still very impactful. But that's what my North Star, because when I see this impact that they have, it impacts me also, and I feel like I'm kind of lit up and fulfilled through other people's success. Same with the mentoring. If I mentor somebody and they have success from some advice that I gave, then their win is my win. And now I'll pause because I know that I can see that you have some questions.
Ideas. No, I mean, I absolutely love that. I'll have a couple of comments. One of them is that I can relate to those people who never knew what they wanted to do, who never knew what they were meant to do. Most of my life, I was like, okay, I don't have passions, I don't have a purpose, I don't have, and even I thought purpose was kind of like a cheesy, corny thing people say. It's like that's not my thing. And after the divorce, after all of that, it's kind of starting. It started to come to me through sitting in silence and doing a lot of introspection and letting intuition guide me to that alignment thing, which was the podcast was my first aligned step, and then that led me to public speaking, to coaching, and now, oh, this is what I meant to do. And you feel that notch inside. It's like, okay, this is, at least if you're very tuned to your body and to your intuition, you will feel it. But I love exactly what you said. Hey, I just want to make somebody's day, and there's nothing better for someone to feel like seen, like truly seen, because we feel that nobody's paying attention, that nobody cares. And when somebody takes the time to genuinely ask you, hey, I want to know about you, like I care, even that simple, that you don't have to have the money to have the yacht or even rent a limo and having people driving around the city, but that simple fact that listen to someone that is very, very, almost nobody is truly listening nowadays, which is
Right.
weird. And I think that's creates a lot of the disconnection that we have in society. I think it's brilliant. And whether it's your purpose or not, when I'm talking about not you, but people in general, that, as you said, it brings you a lot of joy. Because in my case, when I talk to people, I'm very good at holding space for people. I'm fascinated by um, with people. And for me, is when I mention something or when I crack a or when I find a crack and I drop an idea or drop a seed and I see their eyes like, whoa, I find it kind of like a mind blowing thing, or even the shift in perspective, like, okay, that's cool. I love that because I know that I experienced that myself and I want others to experience that. So I feel that if we do more of, if we prime ourselves and if we commit to ourselves to do that, at least as you said, one person, I think that a lot of things will change. And I believe that at some point, those people who are wondering or drifting will eventually find what they're meant to do by just having these simple actions, because you're reconnecting with yourself,
Right.
and that will take it to the next level. Nick, I wish I could have more time, but I now definitely have to bring you back because it's just a fascinating conversation. And especially, there are more things that we can discuss about this entire thing, because I think it is a global crisis at this point where a lot of people are just feeling miserable, and we feel that we need to keep pushing without considering other options. But as a closing question, if somebody listening right now feels that quiet emptiness, kind of like that kind of hole inside, the sense that life looks good on paper but feels off on the inside, what would you tell them is the real invitation hidden in the discomfort?
Can you ask the question in a different way?
Okay, so imagine that somebody right now that listens and feels like, hey, I feel this emptiness inside. And sure, life looks good on paper, but it feels something's off inside. That usually is an invitation to do something.
Yes.
But for them, they don't understand what that is. So what is the invitation that is hidden in that discomfort, in that emptiness that they feel inside?
I would say if you feel that emptiness, then the that audit, do an audit to kind of see where you're at. Once again, a lot of times how we're on like autopilot every day and everything's just kind of automatically, we've just set it up where we just move through the day, but we're not paying attention to what we're doing or not doing. And so you need to audit what is actually happening in your day. What is serving you, what behaviors and thoughts are serving you, and what's stealing from you, what's taking from you in your behaviors and thoughts every day, and just see what you're working with. Because once again, that's nothing can change, and unless you know what you're working with. And when you get that baseline and see with the audit, then that a lot of times will draw your attention to, okay, this is where the problem is. There's a problem over here, but usually nobody will actually take the time to sit down and audit what is happening. They just continue the autopilot and say something's wrong, but I don't know. But you're going to have to pause, and you're going to have to actually look at what you're doing, and then it'll be a lot more clear where the problem is. And then once you know where the problem is, then you can from there start taking steps to do something about it.
The power of pausing is incredible. And I love that you shared, hey, just do the audit, take the time. And I know it's extremely uncomfortable. And I hear people, whether they're trying to get in shape or find a better job or changing careers or launch their business or even be less miserable. Oh, I've been trying to. Have you really been trying, or you been just to keep doing it? Because I feel my friends or even family. It's like, oh, I've tried everything. No, you haven't. No, you haven't. No,
Right.
you haven't. So you want to tell yourself that, because that will give you a peace of mind that, well, this is just who I am. I tried everything, but you're just avoiding the discomfort.
Right.
And once you just go through discomfort, that is painful because, once again, as we talked earlier, that ego is going to try to keep you in that familiar space. And if by you asking those questions, it's going to create enough discomfort that you say, you know what, I'd rather be miserable than entertain a future that is more hopeful but uncertain.
Right.
So I love that people have to go through that. Yeah, Nick, once again, it was such a pleasure having this conversation, and I feel that I could go for another hour or two. It's just like a fascinating thing, and it's something that it really resonates with me because as we share, I went through this reinvention myself almost out of necessity, and life was just kind of pushing me this way. But where can people find you, work with you, and anything?
They can go to resettheman.com. Women can go there too. I just needed a good domain name, but resettheman.com. And also on there, you'll see if somebody needs to take that or would like to take that dignity scan that I talked about earlier. It's on that website, and you can click and take the dignity scan. But yeah, resettheman.com, and then also LinkedIn. Nick Shelton, my smiling face is there. I pop right up. Just reach out, and I'd love to help anyone, any of your listeners, any way I can.
Awesome, awesome. That's perfect. And yes, Nick, once again, I'll bring you back at some point because we need to dive deeper and to explore more things into more details. And I think people need more clarity and more understanding. But more than clarity, they need understanding of what's happening within them. And once you
Right.
understand, oh, it's not that there's something wrong with me. I have a lot of agency and power
Right.
and control over this. I just need to know exactly what the tools are, which you provide,
Mm-hmm.
and that is okay to reinvent. It is okay to change, and you
Yes.
don't have to attach yourself to one image and one identity. Well, yeah, Nick, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. It's been an honor and a pleasure.